how Trump won the White House. That's at 9 o'clock this evening on Sky News and on Sky Atlantic. We'll take you right through the events of the night as they unfolded. Do stay with us.
A call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory, and I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division, have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. It's time. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans, and this is so important to me. For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country. As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family. Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. It's been what they call a historic event, but to be really historic, we have to do a great job. And I promise you that I will not let you down. We will do a great job. We will do a great job. I look very much forward to being your president. And hopefully at the end of 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or maybe even 8 years, you will say, so many of you worked so hard for us, but you will say that that was something that you were very proud to do. You will be so proud of your president. You'll be so proud. Again, it's my honor. It was an amazing evening. It's been an amazing 2-year period. And I love this country. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Even they don't recognise their own town as significant anymore. They feel forgotten, and for them, the change that Donald Trump has sold to them as a salesman, as a businessman, and they've pointed that out too. They like the fact he's a businessman. They bought that change. They're willing to give him a shot.
Yeah, I like that headline, You're Hired, reference to his celebrity there. Thanks very much for that, Mark. Well, with the election being described as America's most divisive in history, what will America's allies think? Has it been damaging to the US's position and their relationship with other countries? Let's talk to Ian Bremner, the president at Eurasia Group. Good to speak to you. Also, Times Foreign Affairs columnist, that's right. No international experience. Donald Trump has no international experience, but he finds himself a world leader.
Yes, he does. And it's not like he hasn't been around the world. He's traveled immensely. George W. Bush had traveled virtually not at all before he was president. But he's done that as a businessman, and he does see international relations as transactional. The thing that doesn't matter for Trump are values. The values of other countries don't make them more or less relevant to the United States as an ally. He is just as willing to work with an authoritarian Russia or a state capitalist China if the deal is good as he is with the UK or with Japan. And that unnerves American allies who were already worried about whether the U.S. was committed to them under the Obama administration. Now, with an America first foreign policy, it'd be hard to send a stronger message to American allies that the level of commitment of the United States to them is going to be under very severe question.
Do you think that will change, though, his approach? I mean, you're talking about his behaviour as a businessman wanting to maximise profit, running a country completely different. Will he have different allies? Will he have an entirely different approach? Or do you think his historical past as a businessman is how he's going to run the country?
Look, I think there are certain things that you don't change overnight. So America's defense posture, NATO, military alliances in Japan. The United States is by far the world's biggest military spender and also the only military superpower. You're not suddenly going to change military doctrine on the back of the enormous Pentagon and the enormous armed forces just because Trump became president. So I don't think you're going to break those relationships. But there are other things like global trade where if you want to get something done, it's not enough to just sit and don't do anything wrong. You've got to be proactive because you have the Chinese out there spending lots of money on infrastructure, building alternative architecture. That is going to be dramatically undermined by a Trump who has already said that he's ripping up the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that he wants to reopen NAFTA. It's even if he were to do none of those things, even if he were to throw away every single thing he said on the campaign trail, this is not a guy who is suddenly going to say, I'm your architect of global trade. And so other countries around the world are going to hedge a lot more away from the United States. This is really the end of the Pax Americana that we've been talking about since World War II. It's become really a G0 world, not a G7, not a G20, one where there isn't global leadership. The U.S. won't play that role, but no one else is capable of doing it.
And you mentioned NATO. He's said on many occasions that the 75% funding that the States provides for NATO is too much and that others should pay their way. How do you see that relationship continuing?
His relationship with Russia is obviously going to be something he wants to build on. He's talked about the fact that, Crimea should be fundamentally Russian. The Russians aren't really in southeast Ukraine. And in that regard, is he really going to say, I'm going to defend the Baltic states no matter what? I mean, Newt Gingrich, who could be Secretary of State, has said that the Baltics are basically a suburb of St. Petersburg. I don't care about them. This direction is going to unnerve a lot of NATO allies. But let's be clear. If you're in Europe, a lot of NATO allies aren't that focused on NATO either. I mean, spending a lot of money on defense when the economies aren't doing that well, you have your own populace, is not a top priority. So it's not just that the United States is saying we don't want to do as much. It's that on both sides of the Atlantic, the most important alliance that has undergirded globalization for the last several generations is weaker than at any point since World War II. And Trump's election really nails the coffin on that.
Okay, you paint a very dismal picture, Ian Bremner. Thank you very much for coming. Good to speak to you. Let's show you this front page now coming in. It's a Scottish front page there. The Buchan Observer, it's called. Their headline, Aberdeenshire business owner wins presidential election. That's the very latest then coming out of Scotland for us there. This is following on, we know about Donald Trump's interest in Scotland and various applications for golf courses, but that's their reflection on the news this morning. Aberdeenshire business owner wins presidential election. Well, the market's reacted badly to the shock of the Brexit vote. Have they reacted in a similar fashion to the shock of Trump's victory? Our business presenter Ian King is in the city for us now. Ian. How can I help you?
Hello, Julian. Yes, you joined me from Fidelity International here in Cannon Street in the heart of the city of London. As you say, the Asian market sold off pretty badly overnight. Japan down 5%, Hong Kong some 2%. Let me show you some of the charts that we've seen. This is the US dollar against sterling, as you can see. Sterling was trading around $123.50 around this time yesterday, shot up overnight to $1.25.50 when it looked like Trump had won. In other words, the dollar was weakening against sterling. Look where it is now. We're more or less back where we were this time yesterday. If I show you the dollar against the Mexican peso, for example, though, obviously Mexico deemed very, very vulnerable to a Trump presidency. Big sell-off there. The peso is something like 6% lower against the US dollar as we speak. We've got the US stocks opening fairly shortly. There'll be a lot of interest, Gillian, in how stocks that are exposed to Mexico trade. For example, the likes of Constellation Brands, 70% of its business is exporting Corona Lager and Modelo beer into the United States from Mexico. Its shares are likely to fall at the opening. Ford, there'll be a lot of interest on that one. Ford, of course, became quite a contentious issue when during the middle of the campaign they actually said they were going to relocate car production from Michigan to Mexico on one of their lines. Trump said, well, in that case, those particular models, when you try and ship them back into the US, I'm going to slap a 35% tariff on them. So it'll be interesting to see how Ford trades at the opening as well. Here's the FTSE 100 though, Gillian. As you can see, we had a sharp drop at the open. Look where we are now, where FTSE is actually in positive territory. It's up 10%, and there's some really interesting movers in that. The likes of Ashtead Group, CRH. These are big building materials, building companies, seem to be doing well out of Trump. Likewise, healthcare stocks.
Ian, thank you. Well, you can watch a special programme. Trump triumphs outside a mogul, captures the presidency, stunning Clinton in battleground states. The subheadline there, working class speaks, blue-collar whites give stinging rebuke to Democratic Party. At the Wall Street Journal, President Trump, populist surge lifts Republican to upset. Clinton lost in key battleground states. GOP keeps Senate and House. And the New York Post, their front page, victorious Donald Trump pictured there. They said it couldn't happen, President Trump, referring to the polls who steered us all in a different direction to the outcome. Well, let's take a closer look now at why Donald Trump won. We can listen into his victory speech.
I've just received